Hello and welcome to HMG Live, a digital production of HMG Strategy. HMG Strategy is the super connector for technology leaders, creating an open dialogue between technology executives, their peers, and technology providers. HMG Strategy is the leader in researching global macroeconomic topics that are relevant for today's technology leaders. And now, live from Studio 1A at HMG Strategy Headquarters in Westport, Connecticut, today's host, lead principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good afternoon for folks that are joining us in the East, and good morning for our friends that are joining us from the West Coast and the Rocky Mountains. I'm Hunter Muller, founder and CEO of HMG Strategy. My team and I are excited and delighted to be here with you today. I think we have an amazing agenda, an incredible summit. Hey, this is the first of a series of digital security summits that HMG is launching on a global level. We realize more than ever that the security element, the security profile, your threat landscape is more important than ever. It's a boardroom issue, right? It's a CEO issue. It's truly a complete world issue now, more than ever, as nation states are taking advantage of open threat landscapes, open enterprise architectures, and such. And today, our first 2022 SASE Security Executive Leadership Summit. You know, again, thrilled and delighted, a world-class lineup of brilliant visionaries, brilliant thought leaders, brilliant practitioners, and amazing partner companies that are here supporting today's summit. That we certainly appreciate your taking time to go to the partner pavilion, the sponsor pavilion, and spend 3 to 5 minutes with each of our partners, Netscope, Insight, as well as Palo Alto Networks. More on them in a minute. But again, welcome to the 2022 summit. There's never been a time where the CISO and the security agenda for the CEO and the board is paramount. It's perhaps not top 1, 2, 3 priorities in every C-suite around North America, for sure. And it's clear more than ever that what has got us to where we are today is not going to get us to where we need to be in the future. We need a complete, secure enterprise with top-tier partners helping us defend every aspect of this extended threat landscape that we're going to be talking about in detail. Now, I understand the SASE model was just made up within the past 2 to 3 years, the SASE framework, if you will, from our friends down at Gartner in Connecticut. More on that here in a minute. Throughout the day, you can stay engaged with your attendees, fellow peers, attendees, by going to the Engage platform and dialing into the social lounge. You actually can email each other, you can spin up a chat, and you can actually spin up a video. You can actually email people that are registered that aren't quite there at the summit yet. So if you have any friends that you see that are attending or had registered to attend, email them asking them to join you, won't you please? And again, visit with our sponsors throughout the summit. It supports the HMG model. It supports what we've been doing over the past 25 months. Big shout out to the HMG team. We spun digital within 10 days. We brought the CIO Summit of America from an in-person 500 people event to a digital summit. 190 digital summits later, 7 in-person summits, thousands of advisory board calls on Zoom and WebEx and Teams. HMG is the leader in digital. It's the leader in thought leadership research of connecting peers on a global level, peers like you that are dialed in today around the hottest topics that are helping keep the enterprise safe and secure, leading innovation, leading disruption, leading innovation, reimagining the customer journey, reimagining and reinventing new business models, new go-to-markets, because if you're not disrupting yourself, watch out. You'll get disrupted. You'll be done within 3 to 5 years as a company, or certainly within 10 to 20 if there's a longer tail to it. More to that later, and certainly some of our other digital transformation summits in the near future. I'd like to bring my good friend Lawrence Bilker to the digital stage. He's the EVP and CIO of Pyramid Health. He's also the chair and board of directors of the Philly SIM chapter. Hey, Larry, great to see you today. We have a great lineup here. Be here together digitally. It's an amazing world where this is the day and age of the digital leader, the CIO, CISO, CTO. You all are rock stars for what you did, what you pulled off over the last 25 months. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a tough challenge, moving everybody to remote and then back to the office and hybrids, and it's been incredible. And trying to maintain security, I know that's going to be a big focus topic today. Trying to keep that kind of underneath and around, and just keeping everybody safe is always of utmost importance.
Never have we seen such incredible, aggressive attacks and threats on a global stage, a global theater, right?
It's been incredible. We've in the Philly SIM chapter, we've had a couple events already. We had one event last month that we brought in an actual hacker and showed us how he would hack into a company network right away. It was really enlightening. The Philly SIM chapter has events, 5 different events like that during the course of the year. The next one's on April 5th. We'd like to have as many people come to these things as possible.
Stuff. And how can people find out more about Philadelphia SIM?
We have a website, simphila, SIMPHILA.org, and come join us.
Excellent stuff. And Larry, what do you hope to gain out of today's summit?
I usually get a couple nuggets of information out of key things that we may or may not be doing, and some best practices and insights from all these peers and experts that we're going to hear from today.
Great stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Hunter.
So, hey, first up, we have Rocco Grillo. Rocco's a dear friend and an amazing individual. He's one of our top industry thought leaders around cyber on a global and a national level. He's the managing director of Global Cyber Risk Services, an incident response investigation at Alvarez Marsal. Rocco?
Hunter, HMG community, thanks for having me again, and always a pleasure. Further to that, we've obviously put together a session. You all have the agenda on SASE. I'm joined by multiple industry colleagues. I see some of them here. Patrick Ford, if you gentlemen could turn on your cameras, join us here. There's Greg Kirichenko. I think we have Michael Moron. I don't see him. And, oh, there he is. Thank you, Mike. And Jeff Brown. I don't know if we have you out there. I know we've been, oh, there's Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. There we go. We had a couple complications there, but contingency plan in 101, and we're all on board. Anyway, a lot going on, no doubt, Hunter. Thanks again for having me last week with the CILA presentation. We touched base on the geopolitical landscape, not enough hours in the day to hit that, but with SASE in play, with what we've seen over the last 2 years, going from first in the blink of an eye, thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees from within their walls to going remote, to the hybrid model where we are today. And again, I've always said technology evolves, the sophistication and attacks evolve, the regulatory compliance. But 5-10 years ago, not many companies across the board were in the cloud. Today, it's like which company is, and even on an individual basis, we have everything in the cloud, including my high school daughters with their TikTok and everything else that goes with the equation. But I think to that end, the theme of our topic, why SASE, why now? And I think I've touched multiple areas, why SASE, why now? But with that, I'd like to hand off to my fellow panelists, and if from left to right, see Greg Kirichenko at the top. Panelists, if you could just introduce yourself, your role and why this is important, and we'll jump in from there. Over to you, Greg.
Sure. Thanks, Rocco, and thanks, everybody. So I'm Greg Kirichenko. I head up security services at Guardian Life. Been there for about almost 7 years now. And when we look at kind of the SASE component, with a hybrid workforce, I think it's imperative these days to have plans of how you're going to go ahead and provide that level of access as well as a level of security for this type of this type of technology. So really look forward to working with you guys on this panel today. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Rocco, and hello, everybody. Jeff Brown, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Connecticut. But prior to that, I was actually 25 years in financial services, information security in a number of different firms, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, BNY Mellon, AIG, and others. I think that now, especially, it's interesting going from these kind of global companies to where we are now. I mean, the state of Connecticut employees have traditionally been on site 100%. Now they are remote 100%. So a lot of things have flipped around. I think this is going to be a great talk today.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Pat, over to you.
Thank you, Rocco. Pat Ford, Regional CISO for the Americas for Schneider Electric. Been with Schneider for about 7 years. Responsible for the profile for Schneider in North and South America, but also globally from a mergers and acquisitions standpoint, working with our colleagues with that. Prior to Schneider, experience in the physical security world predominantly, and as well as my time in law enforcement with the FBI and the cyber division at that point.
Perfect. Thanks, Pat. And Mike Moore, last but not least, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for our fellow West Coasters. My name is Mike Moore. I'm a practice development manager at Insight Enterprises. I focus primarily on our solutions organization portfolio in the cybersecurity and modern infrastructure space. So everything really enterprise networking and the touch points with security is in my realm of expertise and where I help develop solutions and services that we help our clients with. So been in the industry probably almost 20 years now. So been on multiple sides of the coin and the pre-sales, the delivery side, did a lot of consulting for enterprise networking and security solutions for a while. And now I sit in that practice where we focus, like I said, on modern infrastructure, cybersecurity solutions, and how those are really helping our clients. And SASE is just one of those tools in our repertoire that we use to really address the shift in patterns that everyone's really talked about. And especially on the enterprise networking side, when we think of that shift to cloud, how really traffic patterns have inversed, going from majority being on-prem to going into the cloud. So how do we optimize that connectivity? How do we do it securely? And how do we tie some kind of context to the users, regardless of where they're connecting? So very excited to be part of the panel. Nice to meet everybody.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike, and to all the panelists. We've got a wealth of experience here, and just at a high level, I think we talked about going remote to hybrid and the cloud and all the other innovations that go with this. And we've seen how many investigations that we've been involved with on our side, when we say our side from an A&M standpoint, but whether it's third-party cyber attacks, supply chain, Log4j, it continues to evolve. But looking at our topic again, it's why SASE, right? Why now? Why do we start off at a high level? And I think, Mike, one of the things we were talking about is making sure everybody understands the term itself. And, just at a high level, if you can just give us an overview. I hate to say, what is SASE? Kick us off, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. It's more than just a fun thing to say. Obviously, I mean, in the intro you heard, it's a relatively new term, came out in about 2019 from Gartner. I believe one of the analysts coined it over there. But you may hear a few different terms for it, like zero trust edge, elastic cloud gateways, things like that, zero trust architectures. But really what it boils down to is the mesh of cloud security solutions and networking solutions, whether that's cloud networking on-prem. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of technologies that are encompassed into that. But think of SASE as really a framework or a guiding light of how we can approach network and security kind of in this dispersed model that we're living in today, where we need to secure our remote workers at home. We need to support them when they're in coffee shops or when they're on-prem, and we need to be able to provide consistent policy. So really, it just goes back to that marrying of cloud security and networking solutions.
Yeah, great points, and I think for the rest of our lineup, these are things they'll hit out of the park. But I think on that point, the work from home is almost gone in the sense that hybrid or work from anywhere, to your point, Mike. But Jeff, I know when we were talking, you had mentioned how this evolved, and not so much the challenges, but what are things that companies that are migrating to a SASE framework or even already in the midst of it, what are some things that they should bear in mind, especially when we've got a dispersed workforce, whether home, 1 foot in the office, 1 foot out, or pretty much anywhere?
Yeah, what a great question too. And I know that, again, for the state of Connecticut, we had been largely on site. I mean, many of these employees had worked on site only. So now in this remote model, and we are in the midst of in discussions on whether IT might stay remote 100%. I think when we're in IT, we kind of look at this like, look, you're going into an office, the computers aren't there anyway. They're in a data center somewhere else. So even in the office, you're sort of working remote. Now it's really remote, right? So a lot of things have really changed. I believe that we're going to stay in at least a hybrid model in most companies, and I think that SASE, it really does kind of accelerate some of what we've already been thinking. I mean, if you're familiar with the Zscaler model, this kind of takes it to the next level and adds a lot to it. It really helps in terms of simplifying the stack. And I think it's going to really help in terms of just really being able to make sure that folks, no matter where they are secure, and that they're running through a consistent set of security tools, and that it's a simplified stack too. Because I think that we do have kind of tool fatigue in this industry where there's just too many things and too many pieces, and I think that this is going to actually help a lot in terms of simplifying the overall security stack.
Good stuff. Thanks for that, Jeff. And I know, Jeff, you mentioned earlier 25 years with financial services, and between Greg, Pat, Mike, the companies that I've worked with, you're always looking at innovation, and whether it's zero trust or looking at a SASE framework, the latest and greatest, the next best thing. But not everyone is a large company or a Fortune 500. And we work a lot of times with private equity companies that are acquiring smaller portfolios. Pat, I know when we were talking, it's not just about these global behemoth companies or Fortune 500s for that matter. What's an advantage, or how can smaller companies leverage the SASE framework?
Great question, Rocco. The smaller companies, especially ones that have been developed in the last 5 years, they don't have the network and the infrastructure and the legacy equipment that they have to deal with. They can, everything's in the cloud. It's SaaS software, and they can build the stack, as Jeff mentioned, around that. It makes them more adaptable and more secure. It helps with the user experience. I will say that for the larger companies, a company that's well established with a manufacturing, with R&D, with staging or something like that, it probably wouldn't work very well. But you obviously have to use a modified approach. You're never really going to go full 100% SASE with an environment like that, with OT and other things. But the smaller companies, they have a big advantage. And for companies that maybe have a lot of subsidiaries, smaller subsidiaries that aren't connected to your network, developing a SASE platform that you could put them on, and one set of tools that they would all follow, and follow your framework as far as security model and your security tools and security network designs, that having that work on a SASE platform, I see a big benefit for that, and simplifying that approach and delivering security to the end users.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Pat. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the struggles, or when you innovation. I like to say technology is like fire. Fire is good if you manage it. Same with technology. But if we don't talk about cyber resilience or the shortcomings or things of that nature, but Greg, we've talked forever about cyber resilience. In fact, I think we did one of the last sessions during the pandemic. How do companies stay resilient in the pandemic? Well, if I throw that one right back at you again, as it relates to SASE, great technologies, and trying to leverage. I don't think there's a silver bullet one technology, but leveraging that framework. How do we stay cyber resilient when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think, Rocco, that's a great question. I think really a lot of it all boils down to kind of having your plan. Plan is, when something bad happens, what are you going to go ahead and do, and how are you going to be able to adjust? So having your contingency plan, maybe your backup to your contingency plan available for this type of technology. In this specific case, especially in a hybrid work model, you have folks that are working from their houses. They might be working from their offices. So you have to make sure that you're planning for lots of different types of potential variables or conditions that you might be experiencing. So when you go through your design process, it's really making sure that you're looking at the different scenarios and making sure that you're testing to make sure that, the solution you're picking and the setup that you're picking really models and meets the business needs that you're looking to achieve.
Good stuff, Greg. And, I know we've gone from talking about large companies, small companies, resilience. Mike, you've got a wealth of experience in this space, but Jeff, one of the things that, it's always nice to say, whether zero trust, SASE framework, a number of other innovations. What's the first step companies should take, whether they're a Fortune 500, Fortune 50, or mid to small size business when they're considering jumping into a SASE framework?
Yeah, and like most things in life, it helps to really understand the problem first that you're trying to solve. Really, I think with a lot of the remote work now, we really are starting to think about, like, how do we do things like make sure that machines are patched, make sure that we're blocking malicious traffic, things like that. And yet we're in a situation where in many cases, people might be able to go straight into the Office 365 cloud without really VPNing into the network, right? So I've heard a lot of firms talking about like always on VPN, forcing all the traffic back to the mothership. It's like that model doesn't make a lot of sense in the new hybrid world. Really just trying to force all of the network traffic in. It creates latency, especially now on, kind of upload and download. We're doing video all day. We've got all this kind of traffic. Trying to shove all that back through corporate headquarters or wherever your network is just doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. I think the right place to start, Patrick mentioned one, which is really like, when you have an acquisition, you have a smaller subsidiary that maybe doesn't have the same kind of security stack that you do. The other place to start is that legacy VPN. I really don't see a lot of firms talking about expanding VPN unless they're they're in that kind of old model of let's try to just funnel everything through our internal corporate network.
No doubt. Great points there, Jeff. Thanks for that. And Mike, I know we talked about a lot of the keys on this when we're getting ready to move to a SASE framework, embracing it. And I'll open this up to the whole group, but if you could kick us off, Mike, what are some of the drivers, but at the same time, everybody loves to jump into innovation, but we need to know, security can't be an afterthought, especially when we've got CISOs and all too often, unfortunately, sometimes companies, whether it's a business driver, including an M&A, we buy things and, after the fact, it's hopefully this stage in the game, not too many companies out there that security is an afterthought that we can tack on. But what are some of the drivers, and two, risks that companies should be aware of, concerned with?
Yeah, definitely. And Jeff made some good points on it as well. But one thing to keep in mind with SASE is it is that combination of network security and or cloud security and networking. So you're going to have a bunch of stakeholders when it comes to implementing a SASE solution. So you're going to approach it from a networking side in some instances. Sometimes it's going to come from the security team. But really, when we're talking networking at Insight, we're also talking, if we're talking security, we're talking networking, it's got to be married together because those conversations go hand in hand. We know cyber threats are up. So if we're going to be implementing a SASE solution from a networking perspective, I mean, there's a lot of drivers for that. A lot of companies are implementing software-defined WAN, which is just one component of SASE. So how do we securely connect our branch locations to the cloud? How do we provide our remote users that same type of experience? And keep that kind of uniform security context, regardless of where they connect, while optimizing connectivity. From that remote worker standpoint, obviously, network connectivity is a huge component as well. So when everything shifted to kind of hybrid that we've already talked about here before, we saw a lot of clients that was the driver for implementing these SASE models. And as a benefit, it gave them that mechanism to move to a more intelligent WAN architecture like SD-WAN and start integrating these all together to really approach that SASE framework and realize the benefits that you get from all of it. So that's a couple of the drivers, but obviously compliance is going to drive a lot of it. So when you're talking to security teams, a lot of times we'll go in to identify what they have, to Jeff's point. So start with an assessment, start with a workshop, figure out what's important to them, where essentially the crown jewels are and where the quick wins are that you can really complement with a SASE type solution? Is it going to be the data loss prevention is your primary concern? Do you need cloud firewall services, a cloud access security broker, or is it more of the remote connectivity solutions that we talked about before? So a lot of ways you can carve it up. Ultimately, it turns out what's most important to you and your company and what's going to give you the most benefit by tackling first, and then just carve off the pieces as you go.
Lots of stuff there, no doubt, Mike. And, you know, I'll say on that front, you hit some of the pieces, not to come back to Pat on this one, but if you look at the size of a company, not necessarily for your company, Pat, but looking at things on the global landscape, the different entities involved, and you even talked about going down to smaller companies and acquisitions. I'm sure we don't have enough time for you to give us the whole laundry list of risks, but from your perspective, so the key one or two that you think people should think about?
Well, first I'll start off, there's a lot of upside. Okay. I mean, I see that from the very beginning. There's a lot of upside with the SASE model, especially for smaller companies. I mean, even, you know, with the supply chain issues, with getting equipment, smaller company might be challenged, even, you know, ordering a new firewall if they were doing it in a physical world. But some of the risks are, you know, number one, it is new, and you're competing. You have competition for projects and skills, and it just makes it more complex. You know, if you're implementing a zero trust model and you're doing this at the same time, just adds a new complexity to it, which a lot of times solves for it. But again, it's just a new complexity. I'd say upskilling your network and security team to understand it. If you're a smaller company, it takes time, it takes effort, it's going to cost. And quite frankly, if you make a mistake, you know, rolling it back isn't always the easiest thing to do. I will say that you know, employees that worked from home before, when we had, not we, but in companies in general, when not necessarily a Schneider issue, when you have a really sophisticated users, and they realize that the network itself has been, you know, locked down pretty good for security. They realized a long time ago that the remote access maybe was not as secure. So locking that down and changing those environments, it might change the way that those employees work. So for me, it's communicate. These changes are going to impact users. Hopefully, it'll be seamless. And you know, you get a little security fatigue after a while. And so do it risk-based. Try to make it seamless, but again, always communicating with the employees, with the business, because you are competing for resources as well.
Great, thanks for that, Pat. And Greg, I know we've touched base on a lot of the ins and outs. You know, not to say that you're in the middle of this, but no doubt all four of you have seen a lot along the way. From your perspective, any thoughts that you would ask, and maybe the gotchas that people want to know about?
Yeah, and I think Pat hit on a lot of the items from risk perspective. I think some of the gotchas to just be aware of is you make sure you understand their service levels for your providers. Make sure you understand what their uptimes and what their capabilities are. Going back to the kind of the basics, blocking and tackling and the foundational items, you make sure you have the right strong authentication, you identifying you have that trust model that you've established, as well as also making sure that you have good, you know, strong network security that's set up along the way too, and knowing what your policies are for what you're going to allow and disallow. And then finally, making sure that you have the ability to log and monitor and have your instant response processes in place to know when something bad happens or some outlier happens. How are you going to go ahead and investigate it? How are you going to track it down and go ahead and, you know, contain it and then get it out of your network? Because it's not more of a time of if, it's more of a when something happens. You just got to be ready to respond and respond quickly.
Great, thanks, Greg. You know, one of the things, whether it's SASE framework, zero trust, or the proverbial silver bullet, there isn't one technology that's going to fix this, or not so much fix this, address this, or make it a plug and play. Jeff, you know, I come to, you know, CISOs like the three of you, and even 30 in the mix, Mac. I've been fortunate enough to be tied to any product, so I get to ride with that vendor agnostic approach, but work with CISOs and get to see what works, what doesn't work. When it comes to a SASE framework, any key technologies, you don't have to call them by brand, you're more than welcome to, but at the same time, what type of technologies do you really need to get your arms around if you're going to go down this road?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it really boils down to, again, like what problem are you solving and really what business value is it adding? Like we should never have like a business direction of like, we're going to go zero trust or we're going to do SASE, right? Like that's not a business requirement. The business requirements are easing operational use, making sure that our employees are, have the right access to get their jobs done. So really just making sure that you're also not doing those really big, doomed to fail IT rollouts where you're going big bang and doing everything all at once. And that rarely works out well, right? So, I mean, when I look at like, where do we get started on some of these things? Like the same way we got started in zero trust, right? We deployed multi-factor authentication, right? It's one piece of the overall stack. It adds a lot of benefit, reduces risk, right? Immediately. It's a great starting point without trying to boil the ocean. I think where these kind of things get very tricky is when you're just trying to do too much too fast. And let's not forget the operational risk that comes into this. One of your key vendors has an outage, for example, and your entire company now can't get on the network, right? So there's not just security risk here, there's other risk as well.
A little bit of business disruption there. I'll come back later on the business executive sponsorship on that after you get them to get into that. But Mike, I know when we were talking, you've got a number of different thoughts when it comes to the technologies to make this go smoothly. Can you expand on that for the audience?
Yeah, definitely. And MFA is a key factor of that. So I'll tie off on what Jeff was saying there. I mean, identity is going to be central to any SASE framework that you're going to be implementing. Without the identity, you don't have the context. So being able to have an MFA solution that can authenticate those users and provide policy and continually reassess those users as they make those different access requests to different applications is going to be key. Obviously, there's a lot of names in the space. Someone mentioned Zscaler earlier. That was really a secure internet gateway and firewall. But a lot of the components like Cloud Access Security Broker, that's really key, especially for people who are consumers of SaaS, have Office 365. So you can choose what your sanctioned applications are, which applications are going to be tolerated, and what you just won't tolerate because they're high risk and could cause a breach. We also have cloud firewalls, the secure internet gateways that I mentioned before, and then a lot of the new capabilities that are coming out, like remote browser isolation. So users, when they're going to a web page, they can execute that in a cloud on a sandbox machine. So you don't get any kind of that drive-by type attack that you get on some web pages through advertisings and things like that. But a lot of different technologies out there. And really, again, going back to the vendors, a lot of them are piecing it together. Some started with a secure internet gateway, some started with a DLP engine, but it's all starting to come into a portfolio where it's consumed more of as a service or a subscription model, which is really where everything's headed. But it makes it extremely consumable and especially agile, because you can add more scale to it quickly as you bring on new sites, you bring on new users. It's just a matter of updating your subscription to protect those new users, regardless of the technology that you're implementing within that framework.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Mike. And one of the pieces, I think, Jeff, you hit on it, but anyone could take on this. You talked about not only the security side, the resilience side, but resilience to me is almost synonymous with business resilience and business disruption. Before we roll out a new technology or a framework, whatever, how do we get executive sponsorship? I mean, because again, it's the four of you, experts in the space, security practitioners. If you need to introduce this concept to the business, fairly new, now all of a sudden it's, we just got the executives and the board up to speed on the importance of cybersecurity, cyber resilience. How do we throw a new SASE framework or just the idea of migrate into this framework? Anyone want to take that?
Go ahead,
Be
Jeff.
happy to start. Or Pat, you want to go?
No, go ahead. I'll go right after you.
Sure, you got it. So for me, it's more governors and commissioners, but it's really about the business, right? And making sure that we do have a business case, right? Nobody's gonna, a business case is not, we're gonna deploy SASE because a lot of people are doing it, right? Like a business case is that we're going to rethink the way that we do our networking so that people experience less latency, so that they have a simplified security stack. That's a better business case than just saying like, hey, this came up on Gartner, it looks pretty cool, let's do it. So that's my view. You have to really talk in business terms to your business leaders, make sure they understand the benefits that are coming from it, and then leave a lot of those buzzwords out of it. They don't even need to know that it's called SASE.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
From my point, Jeff, I'll agree with you. You have the commissioners and the governor, and you also have the brand. I mean, if you have an identified risk and you're not covering it, if you communicate the risk, we have a trust with our constituents, with our citizens, with our customers, and if we're going to maintain that trust, we want to avoid a risk in a security situation. So to me, it's always a trust factor that we want to maintain that trust with, again, with our constituents, with our citizenships, and with our citizens and our customers. So to me, it becomes a dialogue around trust as well.
Great, thanks, gentlemen. Great answers. We've got about 4 minutes left. I don't want to get Hunter excited. He's got a session-packed day here. I think one of the ones I wanted to throw, if we could go around really quickly, roughly 10 years ago, not to get the analysts excited, when the term of zero trust came out, and lo and behold, it went from a nice industry buzzword to many companies embracing it and continuing to embrace it. The idea of SASE, we're a couple years, 3 years in. Where are we in 5 years? Is it here to stay? Is it something that is going to be a buzzword and the next one will be in place? Or is it going to survive and continue to evolve? Anyone feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Rocco. I think it's interesting because I think most likely it'll evolve like it always does. There's probably gonna be some new buzzword that's gonna be created, but it's gonna be back to the basics of what what SASE is, and it's really providing, as Jeff said, providing that connectivity for employees from anywhere, with the ability to work from anywhere, with the right level of security that's needed in order to really benefit and make sure that you're protecting your business, but also enabling your business to go ahead and perform.
Great, thanks, Greg. We've got a couple minutes if anyone wants to jump in off of. Go ahead, Mike.
I'll add in there. I mean, we see a lot more as a service offerings come out, especially there's been a lot on the compute and cloud side of the house, but also, hyper-converged, but also we're starting to see network as a service coming out. So, I mean, just following the models where more and more people are going to as a service and looking to something like SASE, where it's cloud delivered security and cloud delivered networking. I think it's just going to continue to evolve. And I mean, you mentioned zero trust, and NIST came out with the framework 800-207, if anyone wants some live reading that hasn't checked that out, but really goes into the nuts and bolts of what that zero trust looks like. And SASE checks a lot of those boxes, obviously not all of them, but it starts getting you the right architectures in place to really go there, because there's going to be a lot of people and process that's going to go into zero trust as well, and not just the technology. So I definitely believe it'll continue to evolve, and looking forward to see where it heads, but it seems to be heading in the right direction. And if you look at all the marketing hype out there, SASE's in every partner's repertoire now, from the Cisco's to the Palo Altos to the Fortinets to the VMwares to the Zscalers. I mean, everywhere you look, you're going to see some kind of SASE solution, and it's just an evolution of the products we currently have, and just shifting those to cloud and providing that as a service. So.
Good stuff. Thanks, Mike. Some closing thoughts, Pat or Jeff, or both, if we can fit you in.
Sure, I think it's going to. I think it's also going to continue to evolve, as well as just add a lot of value. The complexity is just too much, right? Like, I mean, we have to hire all these security people to manage things. We're deploying all these products. They all have to be maintained, upgraded. Hardware is end of life. I mean, it just solves a lot of that problem and really simplifies the stack. And one thing we've definitely learned is that complexity is not the friend of security.
No doubt.
And just to add, I mean, you're putting complete trust in your vendor that if you're going to be operating on a unified network and a managed network, complete trust in that vendor, and pick a good one. Pick a good one.
Awesome stuff, gentlemen. Great conversation. I know we could go on for hours. Want to be respectful of the audience's time, and especially Hunter. Hunter, thanks for having us.
Hey, Rocco, really appreciate you and your team. Thank you so much, Jeff, Patrick, Greg, and Michael. Great job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Excellent. Hey, next up we have Kumar Ramachandran. He is the Senior Vice President of Products for SASE at Palo Alto Networks on SASE's place in today's cloud era. Kumar, welcome to today's summit. Great to have you.
A complete treat to be here with everybody.
Context, you're quite an exceptional individual in our industry, in our business. A little context of where you came from in your role now at Palo Alto.
Sure. I joined Palo Alto about 2 years ago on April 21 of 2020. That was the CloudGenix acquisition, formally closed. I was co-founder and CEO for CloudGenix in the SD-WAN and SASE spaces. And we started the company in early 2013. And prior to that, I spent a bunch of years at places like Cisco and Citibank doing networking and security.
Kumar, we've never seen this kind of transformational cycle in the last 25 months. Some folks say 10x innovation and digital transformation that occurred right in the global pandemic and now the geopolitical concerns, right? When you think of digital transformation and you think about the CISO's role with the CEO, the board, the line of business, any ideas, any tips on how to be more effective communicating the cyber profile, the cyber threats, and the risk profile of the enterprise to the board and the CEO?
Yeah, the reality is that we've seen, like you mentioned, I think about 10 years worth of acceleration in enterprise architecture transformation in the course of the 10 months after the pandemic, right? People have had to scramble pretty aggressively, both in terms of setting up their networks right and in setting up security as we've dealt with this hybrid work model. And in most of my customer conversations, what's become very clear is that this new model of hybrid work, hybrid application delivery with hybrid cloud, it's really here to stay. So, what we've seen is that for our customers, a lot of these shifts in security, shifts in networking, they're essential and they've become a core part of their business. Just as an example, right? You look at a customer like Chipotle, they moved from, where you walked up to a Chipotle restaurant, pointed at ingredients and grabbed your burrito, to really a place where it's a multimodal operation, right? That restaurant really has become multi-channel delivery, service delivery place. You can place a mobile order, third-party order, pick it up, touchless pickup, third-party delivery, all those things. So what that means is that the surface area of application access for that restaurant and user experience and the network availability has changed dramatically. So the investments they made in ensuring that they have a hybrid work, hybrid cloud model, they were like absolutely essential for their next generation of business. And the stories go on. Look at the customer like AutoNation, look at various manufacturers dealing with the next generation of just-in-time. All of these have put this pressure. So I think the board level conversation really is about business transformation. And we're now in a world where IT and security transformation is absolutely essential.
So it must be a pleasure, Kumar, to have landed at Palo Alto, one of the leading firms in the world. Talk to us about SASE and why SASE now?
Yeah, I caught a little bit of the last conversation on zero trust. And I think, SASE is a foundational architecture and product to be able to deliver true zero trust. I think someone cited even the zero trust NIST document, etc. There's a couple of observations I'll make, right? The first is that what we've seen with the early implementations of zero trust has been really that a challenging arithmetic, right? You say zero trust, but really there's a lot of implied trust. The analogy I like to give is you walk to an airport, you have a boarding pass, And usually that boarding pass, along with your driver's license, it allows one user to access and enter one aeroplane, right? And that's what you really want. You want a user and application-based access model. The reality of most zero trust implementations today is that it really, once you walk in, you can enter any aeroplane, right? So it's no longer, it's not really constrained to a single application. And worse, within that aeroplane, you can access any section. You could, access the cockpit, etc. So you really want an implementation model where you have a single user being able to access or being able to set up policies for an application and sub-application, right? And so that is the concept of least privilege access that you want to grant. So what we've done with our SASE solution, so our SASE solution encompasses our security capabilities with Prisma Access and Zero Trust in ensuring a really great user experience and giving you all the benefits of a unified solution. So it encompasses security as well as our network with SD-WAN, and we deliver all of it as a cloud-based service.
Thank you. When you think about getting started with SASE, do you have to implement it all, or can you do it in pieces?
That's a great question. So we see customers do both. What we've, I have customers who've just said, we have a full-blown network and security transformation. And both for our private applications, our public applications, SaaS applications, and our users anywhere, we just want to ensure that we have an updated infrastructure. And usually it's a pretty straightforward project, right? You deploy our SASE solution in one fell swoop. And then we also have customers that have very specific projects. So the three projects I see really are, one, I would characterize it as, a VPN replacement, zero trust project, where you're really enabling your home users, mobile users to be able to access all their corporate and internet-based applications. Because in the old model, where people were still deploying VPNs, you were tromboning and bringing it back to your data center. Now that you really want all applications to be free, being able to make that transformation to SASE is helpful. The second big project that we see is around CASB and DLP. We're one of the only vendors out there who have a natively integrated CASB and DLP solution that works for all your applications. So for that same mobile user, what you can do is for 100% of your private applications, your public applications, these days, collaboration is the new TCP, right? Zoom has become the new TCP because we're spending so many hours on things like Zoom, Slack, etc. So traditional models of DLP, they kind of hold you back. You really want those DLP and CASB projects to have a solution that gives you the stepping stone into ZTNA. And then the third project that we see is around branch transformation. Oftentimes, what we are finding is that even for companies where people are walking back to the branch, the pressure on the network is immense, because even when you're in the office now in a hybrid work model, there's so much video collaboration going on that you really have to ensure that you have things like SD-WAN, security, all of it natively embedded. So you could start with any one of these three projects, right? A ZTNA or a CASB DLP or a branch transformation SD-WAN project. And I think you end up as long as you select the right building blocks, you can end up in a very, very powerful zero trust SASE-based solution.
Great stuff, Kumar. When you think about zero trust or a ZTNA, how do you ensure a full stack inspection while implementing SaaS?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And this goes back to some of the disparity between the definition of zero trust and some of the implementations out there. Most implementations that we've seen, one of my customers, they call it the allow and ignore model, right? Where what happens is that the zero trust solution is inspecting like an SDP in a software-defined perimeter model. It's really doing some amount of app publishing, and it's after the initial handshake, it gets out of the way. It says, you know what, I'm going to allow this access, and then I'm going to ignore whatever happens. Going back to that airport example, that's as if once you get on the plane, we're not going to pay any attention to you whatsoever. Doesn't matter you're banging on the cockpit door or displaying other extremely provocative behavior, we're going to ignore you. We'd never run real life systems like that. And so you really need continuous trust verification. You need to ensure that it's not allow and ignore, that even after the initial handshake, initial access on an ongoing basis, you are indeed doing deep security inspection, ensuring that data is protected, data exfiltration, it's not happening, etc. And you have to do it for all your applications, right? You can't say, you know what, United and American Airlines planes will apply those inspections. The remaining airlines will get to it when we get to it. It truly has to be a solution that spans private apps, SaaS apps, internet-based apps. And so, I think it's pretty important when we think about zero trust, that not only are we actually having narrow, least privilege-based access, but also applying deep inspection against those.
Hey, Kumar, when you think about the vision of Palo Alto, the mission of Palo Alto, and R&D, right, staying ahead of the bad guys, you folks have done a lot right over the years you've been in business. An amazing success story. Vision, mission, R&D. Pick one.
Yeah. So, I spent some of my early part of my career actually carrying those things called pagers that my 16-year-old daughter gets a chuckle because I still have one of those. And anybody that's held a pager and been on-call support, whether for security, for SOC operations or NOC operations, you just know that as companies and problems evolve at scale, manual interventions obviously are less and less desirable. So all of us are looking at the holy grail of automation. And I'm a big believer that most automation really starts from data. So we made a massive amount of investment in not only making sure that we have data from a variety of sources. So from a security and NOC perspective, we're able to analyze user experience all the way down when you're home, when you're mobile, when you're in a location, and we're able to look at different segments of that user experience. And we're also looking at, from a security perspective, we're looking at data at scale. So what we've done is that we've consolidated all our data lakes, and then we're able to run algorithms against them at massive scale. Here's one of the great innovations that Palo Alto has done, including in the SASE space. 95% of all new threats, they're stopped by inline ML techniques by Palo Alto. So if you let that sink in for a second, what that means is that in 95% of those 95% of the cases, there is no need for a first patient, a first victim. There is no need to identify signatures, publish signatures, etc. It's a very transformational way of defending against the bad actors. And the remaining 5%, of course, we have our industry-leading wildfire, advanced threat prevention, etc. But you're just really seeing the power and impact of that. And a lot of this only comes at scale, right? We stop 224 billion threats every single day, right? 4.3 million security updates. And so what we're doing is that we're continuing to evolve our platform such that we're able to ensure full automation of the cycle, both from a NOC perspective and a SOC perspective. So incident avoidance, right? So I spoke about 95% of new threats, they avoided with inline ML. And then there is incident detection, right? If you're trying to do incident detection, making sure there's a rich variety of sources based on which you're analyzing the information and from a rich variety of locations. And the third essential component is incident remediation. Now, to automate incidents from a remediation or automate incident remediation, you do need powerful system APIs, right? It can't just be CLIs masquerading as APIs. There has to be system-wide APIs. There has to be deep trust in the algorithms so you can actually reprogram the systems. And once you're able to do that at scale, then you get automation. Now, the reality with both security and user experience is that there's always going to be evolution. So we don't keep still at any point in time, but with the levels of investment we're currently making in data and automation, we continue to see massive impact in our customer base.
Mark, great stuff. Loved having you today here on today's Digital Theme Summit. Great to have you here. Thank you so much to you and Palo Alto Networks supporting today's summit. You can learn more about Palo Alto in the Partner Pavilion on the Engage platform, plus on the HMG website in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Hey, next up we have John Iannarelli. John's the former assistant special agent in charge of Phoenix and a senior executive advisor at the FBI. John's going to lead a panel on applying SASE methodology, blending the right ingredients for success. John, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those on the East Coast, and great to be here today. Thanks for tuning in, and we are going to talk about what you need for your company involving SASE. You know, essentially, everybody's using the cloud platform to run their businesses today, and we need to talk a little bit about what methodologies you need to adopt, how you're going to safeguard your employees, your data, and most importantly, your assets as well. We're going to talk about the skill sets, the technologies, some of the monitoring capabilities, and all the intangibles you need to know to safeguard your enterprise. For today, we've got 3 highly educated, highly skilled individuals who are dealing with SASE, and they're going to share their insights on how you can be better at your job and your company can be safer. Let's kick it off with Andy Bennett. He's the CISO of Apollo. Andy, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to see you. And I'm going to start off by saying key businesses, they're driving and pushing organizations to SASE. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are you doing in your company?
Well, I'm a consultant at the core of our business. And so what we're doing is supporting our customers in identifying how to be most successful. And what we've seen, not just because of the pandemic, but even leading up to the pandemic, is a push out to the edge, which is what SASE is all about. And so when a customer has specific use cases that are indicative of a push to the edge, whether it's application-based, remote workforce-based, distributed systems, or even products being delivered to clients in ways that that require processing at the edge. You have to have a way to ensure that all of these services are being delivered securely, but they're happening outside of your traditional network. And so SASE is the direction and the reference architecture we use to help guide them to deliver these services internally and externally securely. You're on mute.
Oh, stand by. I got a bunch of questions for you. I'm going to jump back to you in a second. But next, I want to introduce Ryan Loy. He's the CIO of EBS-CO Industries. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. As he mentioned, I'm the CIO for EBSCO Industries. For those of you on the call that may not be familiar with us, we are a privately held diversified conglomerate. We operate similarly to a private equity firm, but we are a long hold. So we're family-backed money, but we tend to operate across 26 different countries. We're across 5 different industry verticals, and we own and operate 12 companies across those verticals.
Well, great. Well, tell me, what kind of role, what's the concept of SASE play in your company, and what are you doing to secure everything that's important to you?
Yeah, I'd focus more on the latter part of the question. As it was so eloquently put earlier, I don't think any of us in operations have seen such a push for digitization than what COVID has thrusted upon us. And so this, we'll call it a grand social experiment of proving out that you can work from anywhere, proved to be true. And so for us, because we own and operate so many different companies across so many different verticals, I have, like many of you here on the call, kind of the traditional old legacy environment, which is, we have a lot of assets, but we don't yet have a true CMDB. We have a lot of different networking technologies that we're trying to standardize. We have processes that we can get better at monitoring and improving on. And then we're struggling to really kind of consolidate on a single reference architecture. And a lot of these pose a real unique challenge when you start thinking about well, now how do I better secure a distributed workforce while I move more of my resources to the edge? And so for us, we grab SASE as more of a framework, as a way of thinking, which is, okay, now that we have SD-WAN in place, and we'll do perhaps a Zscaler rollout for some of our remote offices, how can we move our traditional security services, our traditional way of kind of diagnosing, monitoring, detecting, and alerting against, how do we move that more towards an agile model and way of thinking in the cloud, and then also kind of move a lot of those security-based capabilities to the edge. And so I really appreciated what Kumar's comments were from Palo Alto. And actually, I didn't know Palo Alto was the only one that also does DLP, so I may be reaching out to him. But what I'm here to help provide and answer some questions on is really just kind of a pragmatic approach on how we've taken our architectures and where we've been from an investment standpoint, and really start to talk about, okay, how can we, in a quick form and fashion, move it towards more secure, efficient manner that puts more of those resources closer to our end users.
All right, great. Well, likewise, stay right there because we're going to be coming back to you. But last but not least, I want to introduce Larry Bilker. He's the Executive Vice President and CIO of Pyramid Healthcare. Larry, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, John.
So Larry, healthcare, big target for a lot of what's going on in the world and all the cyber criminals out there. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in your company with SASE.
So we, just like Ryan just said a minute ago, we recently just completed an SD-WAN rollout and are securing that edge. Frankly, the best we can right now. We're watching over filters for addresses that are being run through different sites, and have a whole support process for how to selectively block or unblock them, as the case may be, across different policies. So, but it's really about securing that protected health information, anything within the walls, making sure that it doesn't get out through DLP and through other means. It's really about tightening those screws down as best as we can. And as Ryan said, we're saying we're in the same boat. We're trying to see that one lens to be able to see all this stuff. And there's really not one particular way to do it. You have to use multiple tools, multiple avenues, multiple layers of protection, still even this day today. And it's even more complicated with all of our users that are traveling. Yes, we are back to traveling some. We're not solely remote, and we have support services that are being provided in residence for some of our facilities. Pyramid Healthcare, 10 seconds on it, is we're primarily a behavioral health firm, and we support people that are struggling with substance use and abuse, and help them back to health. And we also have outpatient services across 106 facilities, stretching from Connecticut down to Georgia.
Well, thanks, Larry. And certainly in healthcare, you guys have a lot of issues to deal with, HIPAA regulations, et cetera, none of which apply to the rest of us in the private sector. So the duty to safeguard all that proprietary and sensitive information. Thanks for the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Andy, let me take it back to you for a second. I want to ask you, I hear the terms zero trust and SASE sometimes being used almost interchangeably, and that doesn't really make sense to me. Can you talk a little bit about that and the distinctions?
Sure. So SASE is, as I already forgot whether Larry or Ryan said it, I think it was Larry, is a way of thinking, right? It's a pragmatic approach to the whole of the problem, whereas zero trust is a reference architecture for a subset of that problem. Zero trust as a reference architecture focuses on identity and authorization, and it removes the default trust by origin or location. So previously, if you started with it from the inside of the firewall, we just trusted you. And zero trust as a concept and top level thinking seeks to remove that assumption. Whereas say zero trust architecture is different from zero trust as a principle, and it's about knowing and controlling what's on your environment. And then we have another term that gets mixed in there, which is ZTNA, which is the one that you actually see most often tied to SASE, because ZTNA is the operationalized approach to proxying and brokering access between users and applications. And so zero trust is a component and is implied in some way into the overarching thinking that has formed the basis for SASE. But zero trust is not SASE per se. They are not one and the same, though they do erroneously get used interchangeably often. The actual component of zero trust as applied operationally in SASE is ZTNA. And hopefully I've made that a little clearer, because it's easy to start talking in circles when you're going through these things, because there's a lot of marketeering and buzzwords that kind of muddy that water. But SASE is the overarching approach with the layers that Larry described to control the whole and get visibility to the whole, whereas zero trust as a top line concept is about removing previous assumptions in favor of a posture that allows us to assume compromise but continue operation.
Good, great explanation. And certainly those in the upper echelon of the C-suite, they need to understand the difference, because if they have one, they don't have the other, and they may think that they're covered in doing what they want to do. So thanks for taking the time to explain that to everybody. Ryan, I'm going to jump back to you. I want to ask you, in deploying all this, there's challenges. We know that. What are some of the challenges you've seen, and what do you suggest for us to basically overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, first and foremost, before we really even considered the concepts of SASE and that way of thinking, as I think it was Kumar, someone before that mentioned, one of our biggest challenges was really getting an end-to-end view of kind of what are our cyber threats. So let's say, and this is fact, so I use, Checkpoint on the edge. I have CyberArk for credentialing. I use Sophos for EDR. I have Tenable for vulnerability. And then I have a couple of different solutions for security operations center that we run. But ultimately, no matter what you do from a networking standpoint or for security as a service, if you don't have true end-to-end visibility of what the kill chain may look like, you're really just exacerbating that problem by putting it in the cloud and decentralizing it. So for us, we wanted to ensure that we had full end-to-end visibility of any transaction that occurs across our network. And we used a product in the XDR space that was able to pull it all together and helps provide us that view. So number one, I would say the challenge is getting full end-to-end visibility. So taking these disparate sources and pulling it together. And number two, with identity at the center, we really had to go through and better understand, out of all the identities that we have out there, how many of them truly need domain admin level access, how many developers really need elevated access. While we own the companies that I mentioned before, one of our companies, while it's in healthcare and higher education, it's really a software company. And we have about 1,600 people in total and just in IT in that space, including contractors. So helping to ensure that they have the right level of access is important. And then lastly, and I think this is why it's box one on the NIST framework, is just really knowing all your assets. It's great to say, we're replatforming our data centers. It's great to say we're closing our 5 major data centers. We're going to go full force with AWS, and then we're kind of decentralizing the security capabilities and putting them on the edge, and we're getting rid of VPN for immediate BYOD access. And while it's all secure, that's wonderful. But frankly, as part of our evolutionary journey, as we've started to look at full end-to-end visibility, as we started to reduce the amount of elevated access, as we started to change our policies and procedures and our people, we needed to get a better control of how many assets we have, which is that I call it the unicorn. I've been a CIO at a number of places. The unicorn's always, do you really have a full CMDB that's accurate? I think it's a unicorn. We all chase it because I don't know if it really exists. And so we're really forcing that. And every time we make steps or progress towards those challenges I mentioned, we've partnered with a firm that comes in and they do both internal and ethical. They do an internal ethical hack and an external hack, which we found to be very, very good. And so the external hacks, knock on wood, never been successful. But internally, we don't do this to do a gotcha. I do this as a way to see how can we better learn on our processes and our reporting. And so we'll set off alerts on certain segments and test our systems to say, okay, well, if we're truly going to be separated out based on the edge from a security standpoint, are we able to collect, diagnose, and alert on these assets that are no longer managed centrally, and what would that look like? And so it's very important, I would say, as you make that journey, to go back and verify that the progress you're making is still putting your environment or putting your enterprise in the same secure fashion that it was before.
Ryan, you also make a great point about the whole gotcha, because if we're going to do that and we're going to be looking for what the weak links are, I've seen companies punish employees because they made a mistake. And what does that do? That just deters us all from revealing what's the problem and covering it up. Thanks for pointing that out. So let me go back to Larry. Larry, I want to ask you, what's a good, successful SASE deployment look like in your wide-ranging healthcare operation?
I forget who said it now earlier, is it's not about SASE. It's about what the impact is on the business. And so what I would call a successful implementation is being able to block or at minimum identify attackers and to be able to keep them out as best as possible. So it's really about that, and I would say from an impact perspective, it's really about creating that heavier wall. And it's not just about the wall around your core infrastructure or even around your facilities. It's beyond that, because we have these people that go remote. And it's really about extending that net that go when they are remote, is that edge is around them. To coin a probably not the best analogy, but from the Star Trek era, extending the shield around the one ship to the other so they can travel together and be protected. That's the analogy I've used, actually, and a lot of people actually really get it because it's a simple one to understand. And that's really what it comes down to, is making us successful by educating and helping people understand what we're protecting and how. And if we can create that secure edge, not to to bolster the phrase, everyone will actually understand.
Very good. So always enjoy the Star Trek analogies when we have these cyber gatherings. So Andy, let me ask you, Larry just made some great points about a successful deployment. In trying to achieve a successful deployment, what are some of the challenges that stand in the way from that successful deployment for your company?
Well, actually, I have a thought that extends Larry's definition of success to the experience, and that experience is also the challenge. Because when you extend the protections out to the edge, when you enforce things out beyond the firewall that previously weren't enforced per se, doing so in a way that doesn't adversely affect the user experience is one of the challenges. And if your implementation of SASE goes too far and introduces too much friction to the end user in a way that they previously have not had to watch for or mitigate or deal with in their using of the resources. I'm trying to formulate my thought on the fly, because this is not what I had planned to say here, because it's super critical that the experience for the end users not jeopardize the implementation. Because if the end users refuse to use the technologies because of the friction we've induced in the processes to get them access, then we are destined to fail in that implementation. Another thing that I've seen stand in the way of these things is people holding on to the old ways, partially because of the fear of change and the perception of the friction they will introduce. But those legacy systems and organizations not being willing to let go of how we normally used to access things, of even security departments standing in the way, becoming the Department of No again, because they just can't wrap their mind around how they're going to get the visibility. And maybe it's because they're so busy they haven't had time to go to seminars like this. But it's super, super important. And the next thing is having API-enabled systems. And I think the speaker right before us was discussing the criticality of APIs. But yeah, he did. He said APIs, true robust APIs, not just extended CLIs. That's absolutely critical. And if your organization is not ready to fully embrace and integrate with APIs in a cloud-centric fashion for getting the visibility across these disparate parts that I believe Larry mentioned, the disparate parts, or no, that was Ryan. Getting the visibility across the disparate parts, requires a decentralized stack, and that decentralized stack is found in SaaS components or other cloud components where you've deployed them. And the SD-WAN is what ties it all together. And so if your organization isn't ready and willing to embrace the things that enable SASE and provide the visibility that Ryan definitely identified as key, and I agree completely, then those are the challenges that make SASE untenable until you're ready to deal with them in your organization.
Very good. And I totally understand the whole new mentality, having come from the government, which is extremely slow in adopting anything that's new because it's always worked in the past. I like to say the FBI, when it comes to technology, they're using yesterday's technology tomorrow is basically the methodology for them. But hopefully that's changing. We've talked a lot about the challenges and the implementation. Let's, in the last few minutes we have here and wrapping up, to each of you, let's talk about the positives. What are some of the improvements and benefits that we get by employing the SASE methodology to your companies and all the other businesses out there listening today? I'll start with Larry. Jump in, please.
All right, thanks, John. So one of the biggest things that we've seen so far from implementing this type of model is better reporting, better visibility, and consolidation. We still don't have a single lens, but we've been able to get a lot better visibility into where some holes were and be able to identify and close them by making sure that our edge is secure. And by just taking the various feeds, whether the SNMP traps or and otherwise, and combining that together with the existing logs that we already have, we're just getting so much more richer information. There's still too much of it, but frankly, it's the reporting has gotten significantly better.
That's great to hear. Ryan, how about you? What are you seeing that's the benefit, and maybe some parting words of wisdom you can leave us on how we can sell the concept to those who are quite not on board yet?
I would say the process itself is what's been rewarding for us. It requires a lot of internalization from a what do we own standpoint, both from processes and workloads. So as we started our migration to the cloud suite, we have a cloud first strategy, a strong bias towards the cloud. And we did it for many of reasons, some of which I'm sure you guys can just rattle off the top of your head, but that agility and efficiency and predictability. I would say when you start to do the critical thinking on, okay, how do we actually do this? How do you take these workloads and securely move them to the cloud? The whole concept, the way you think, we adopt as design for security. And so we're moving it by workload. And so as you look at it from a critical business workload standpoint, as we migrate those to the cloud, you could eventually get to the zero trust comments that were mentioned before, or the airline analogy, which I thought was also pretty effective, which is, how do we better help limit the traffic of those that are only authorized? So for me, it's been as much as a learning journey, which I feel is the most benefit for us to the team members. We have improved our level of visibility, our time to response is all good. So from a technical governance standpoint, we have seen benefits, but by far, I would say the greatest benefit is in our staff. They're getting a lot more exposure. We're asking ourselves those real critical questions of why do we do that? Do we really need to be doing that going forward? And we're cleaning up mess. As all of us in IT, we have a big percentage of our total life is keep the lights on, and the other part of it is transformational projects. And that keep the lights on tends to be a minimalistic based attitude around commodity based services. And there's not a lot of kind of going back and cleaning up something that's been there for a long time because, well, it's something we've always done. And so when you start to shift that model, it's a great way to think and reposition the organization for growth and essentially a new way of working, a new operating model.
Fantastic. Thank you. Andy, we've got a minute left. I'm going to give you the closing words. Tell us, what are the things that is the positive in this transition that we can use to sell the SASE model?
You bet. I'll power right through it then. First is contribution to the bottom line. A proper, thorough implementation of a SASE architecture reduces operational costs in the long run. The next one is user experience. Happy users are productive users, and providing SASE provides ubiquitous access to corporate assets when done properly. And last but not least, of course, because I am a security person, is improved visibility, and improved protection, security, and all other operations is a natural follow-on from that visibility. And so those are the three things: reduce costs, ubiquitous access, and visibility that drives security and improvement across the board in the security program.
Gentlemen, fantastic information. Andy, thank you for wrapping it up for us. Great stuff on the SASE. I appreciate all your contributions. Hunter, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Great, John. Really appreciate it. Excellent job, John, Larry, Ryan, and Andy. Thank you so much.
Hey, Hunter, you're on mute.
It may be the Russians. We're not sure.
Okay, wrapping up.
There we go.
You got me now? Thank you. Great job, guys. Love it. Thanks, Ryan, John, and Andy and Larry. Great job. See ya. Hey, next up, we have Mike Anderson. Mike's the CDO and CIO of Netscope, a national partner of HMG Strategies, on the business value of SASE architecture. Mike, great to see you.
Hey, Hunter, it's great to be here. And
when you think about it, over the last 25, 26 months, things changed dramatically for the C-suite, the CEO, the board, and things changed dramatically for the whole security industry. What are the top 1, 2, or 3 things that you want to leave the audience with today, and what changed?
You know, I think the key thing we've seen change is, you know, the way our people work, right? Obviously, we shifted to work from home. We've seen an acceleration. We say digital transformation, but we've seen more adoption of SaaS applications. We've seen more things built in the public cloud, which has introduced new challenges that we all have to address. That's been one of the big areas. 2 is we've seen the threat landscape change. You know, I often say we talk about omni-channel in retail. You know, I think we have omni-channel in cybersecurity. You know, I can't tell how many times I have my mother texting me asking me, "Hey, I got this text message from this company. Should I click this link?" And so I'm fortunate she actually texts me, but you know, the attackers are getting smarter. You know, and as we think about nation state attacks and the risk we have there, you know, we've been working with a lot of our customers over the past couple of weeks around areas of interest, and are they seeing any attacks or things coming in from nation states? And then I think the third one is really the talent area, and a lot of people are getting budget increases year on year. I got one from last year to this year. The challenge we've got is we have a talent gap in cybersecurity. We don't have enough people, enough supply out there in the market to support all the open roles we've got. But even with our budget increase, the inflation is higher than the budget increase we're getting. And so with that talent shortage, we're also trying to figure out where can we go save money so that we can keep the people we have. Because now someone can be hired in Northwest Arkansas with the same pay rate they would get in New York City. And that represents challenges for a lot of companies. And so we want to retain the talent we have and at the same time fill the open roles we have at the same time. And so we have to find places to optimize our cost structures to give us the ability to do that.
Thanks so much, Mike. Collaboration is key across the C-suite, the line of business, within the technology area, the CIO, CISO, CDO. Why is collaboration so important?
It's a great question, Hunter. One of the things that I often get, when I talk about, when I first joined, Netscope from Schneider Electric about a year ago, a lot of my peers reached out and said, "Hey, tell me, you went to the other side. You went to work for a vendor." And I have these conversations and I tell them what we do. And they say, "That's super interesting. Let me introduce you to our CISO. So can you make an introduction for your sales team to my CISO?" And, what bothered me in that conversation, especially as I started having conversations with our customers, was that where things start to stall is you have a priority from a security standpoint. It's a priority for the security team, but it's not a priority for your network teams. It's not a priority for your endpoint teams that are deploying your laptops. And that misalignment is what slows companies down. I've seen large global organizations, deploy our technology in as little as 90 days. We had over 100,000 employee organization do that deployment in 90 days. But then I see organizations that have 1,000 employees take 12 months because they just can't get their own organization aligned because that's a security topic. But security is a team sport. It requires everybody in the organization, not just IT and security, to all be on the same page and prioritize these initiatives. Especially, we talk about SASE architecture. Deploying that, that benefits all of us. There's a lot of value around it, but we all have to be aligned to make sure we can execute.
When you think of SASE, it hasn't been around that long in terms of the concept. Why is it so important? What's the value and how do you define it?
The value comes in, earlier on, we're talking about, I think it was Jeff was talking about, always on VPN and routing traffic back to our data center in the first panel. When you think about the SASE architecture, if you really think about it, we want to balance our employees being both productive and secure while working from anywhere. I think Andy talked about friction, which is a word I often use. We want to make sure if our users can't get their job done, they find ways to want to work around the security. They start trying to turn off or disable the security. They just go use a different computer and see if they can get their job done there. And so part of the value from the SASE architecture, when implemented correctly, is it moves the security controls closer to user, so I don't have to operate in an always on VPN mode. One of the areas when I talk about value is our data. A good example. We had a company that was a financial institution that was going through a proof of concept with us, and our team went in at the end of the process, and they were reviewing the results, and they pointed to and said, "Here's a user yesterday that just uploaded 1,400 files to their personal OneDrive instance, and they had allowed OneDrive as a destination in their organization, but they couldn't distinguish between a personal and a corporate instance." And they immediately stopped the POC conversation and said, "That's an executive in an exit interview. We need to stop them before they leave the building." And that is a true story. And so, when I think about value in our data, our people, I was on a call last week with the CIO, and they said they know a lot of people that are working two jobs, right? They got two different jobs. They balance it. They've got their day job. They had two day jobs, and they're balancing two. I try to figure out how they have enough hours to do both in the same week, but they're doing that. So think about that. Our employees out there today potentially working in two different jobs. And where's our data going in that conversation? And that's a key component of value. But going back to that split tunnel piece, a lot of us split tunnel traffic because we were on video calls like this, and our employees complained about having a bad user experience. And so we did that split tunneling of traffic. And in reality, if we deploy a SASE architecture well, you see a huge reduction in traffic running back through my data center. And so it's not just the security technologies that get consolidated, it's everything in our network, because everything in our network was built on throughput. That's what defines that cost. And so if we see a 70 to 80% of traffic is not destined for our data center anymore. So if we're running an always on VPN, all that cost is now going through my network infrastructure. So if I eliminate that, all the hardware cost goes down, that circuit costs go down. We're seeing people save anywhere from 30 to 70% off of their baseline cost. So if you want to go find a way to free up some cost to go keep your current people and not lose them to someone down the street, this is a great way to do that.
Great stuff. Hey, when you think about it, Mike, Netskope's got a real interesting vision and mission, and you have a lot of R&D ongoing. What was it about Netskope that attracted you?
When I looked at it, and that's a great question. When I looked at it, I looked at the market and I saw a lot of, web filtering technologies. I think that came up on the first panel, looking at how do I protect people going to the public internet. I saw some movement towards more that zero trust network access. And what I saw from, the Netskope standpoint was really what I care about today is the cloud, right? If you look at the latest reports, a lot of our threats are coming from cloud file storage. Solutions like OneDrive and Google Drive that we want our employees to use, that's where a lot of threats are exposed. And so when I looked at that problem, we look at, internet traffic, all internet traffic, and about 70% of that's destined for public cloud and SaaS. And so for me, when I looked at Netskope, it's really around how do I put better controls around that? I heard our CEO when I was in the early, I attended the EBC, and he used the word layer 8. And I said, well, layer 8's not part of the, that's not a standard. He goes, well, it's the best way to explain, we define layer 7 as the application level. Layer 8 is what is the individual user trying to do within the application. And so I think when someone earlier, I think it may have been Andy, talked about, adaptive access. We think about adaptive zero trust. And it's, what do I know about the person, the device they're on, where they're connecting from, and then how do I adapt the access they have based on and what they can, not only what they can access, but what can they do in the application. I may say, for a good example, inside Netscope, when one of our salespeople resigns, we put them into an Active Directory group called Resign User. And what that does is it immediately blocks their ability to download data out of Salesforce. They can't download data out of Workday. They can't download data out of our Google Drive environment. They can still work in those. They can still view things in a browser, but they can't download it to their machine because we don't want them to take that data with them when they leave. And I didn't change any of my applications to do that. And so to me, that's a great example of an adaptive zero trust, policy around how do we adapt the security policy based on what I know about that user. And what I know about that user as they're leaving my company in the next 2 weeks.
Great stuff. Hey, Mike, I know Gartner just came out with the Magic Quadrant for Security Service Edge. Tell us about the SEC, how it fits in the SASE architecture. And is that a CISO conversation or a CIO conversation?
The best way that I would explain security service edge, if you look at the original, SASE was a Gartner term, that came out several years ago that talked about this convergence of network and security. The simplest way to think about SSE or security service edge, it's SASE without SD-WAN. So that's the simplest way to think about it. It's the security stack that lives within the SASE architecture. And when you think about that, it's really important to have a converged stack. And so when you think about all those components, it's your secure web gateway. So someone mentioned Zscaler. That's part of that area. That's a place we play in as well. Heard someone talk about Cloud Access Security Broker. Again, that's where Netscope started. That's a key component of this. We hear about Zero Trust Network Access. That's a key component of this as well. And so those are all part of the security service edge area. And this is absolutely a CIO and CISO conversation, because a lot of those technologies we use today to filter web traffic, to provide those capabilities, live on appliances or technology that sits within our network. And so we need our network teams to take out that old technology, that's technical debt the minute I deploy a SASE architecture. I need my endpoint teams to make sure they prioritize the single agent that's now going to be in a machine. A lot of times there's a lot of energy that's put into concern around agents. Well, this is actually an opportunity to consolidate agents on the endpoint. And so for those reasons, it requires everyone in the IT organization. If I start making policy changes to a SaaS application like Salesforce without telling my application owner for Salesforce I'm putting that policy in place, I'm opening myself up for a lot of heartache. And so it requires that coordination across all the leaders in an IT organization. So it requires both the CIO and the CISO, regardless where that CISO reports, whether it's the CIO or outside the IT organization altogether.
Excellent stuff. Mike, when you think about mistakes security people make, generally IT people make, not communicating effectively to the CEO or the C-suite, any tips from your success in your career?
One other thing I would say is, make sure you don't talk about technology, right? That's the key thing a lot of people get into. Someone asked me, how do I talk to my board around or my C-suite about a SASE architecture? I said, the first thing is don't even say the word SASE architecture. What's the outcome we want to drive? And what I tell people is on that side, I simplify and say, look, our environment was built around a time when people worked in offices and our data and our applications resided in data centers we owned. And the reality is neither of those continue to be true. We've been moving to the cloud with all of our applications and data, and our people are working hybrid. They're not going into an office anymore. And so why are we having all this? We need to modernize our environment to support this new reality. And that's the way I describe a SASE architecture when I say, why do we need to do this from a board standpoint? That's the thing. That's how I articulate this, and it makes sense to people. So what do we tell people is, take it and try to use analogies and stories. That's the other thing. And when you use analogies and stories, people can relate to those. If you get into the bits and the bytes, you're going to lose the audience, especially when you're talking to your board. And so when you're talking about cybersecurity, talk about risk. Make sure you're aligned around what are they concerned about and what is their risk appetite and where does their concern lie. And so those are the conversations. What I would encourage people to do is really understand, where people are coming from and understand, how they could use storytelling is a really good skill set when talking to your executive team and your board.
Great to have you on today's Digital Summit. Thank you so much for your national partnership Really appreciate it. Can people reach out to you directly on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. And we'll to carry on the conversation there and encourage you to go take a look at the new Gartner Magic Quadrant. It's exciting, as well for Netscope. We were recognized as a leader. So that's maybe that validates my choice from a year ago when I joined the company. So please connect with me. Happy to carry on the conversation there as well.
So great to see you. Look forward to seeing you in person soon.
All right. Thanks, Hunter. Appreciate
Excellent.
it.
Thanks. You can learn more about Netscope if going to the Engages platform, the Partner Pavilion, and visit their booth. Hey, next up we have Eric Tomasi, Managing Partner of Simosis Security and past Chairman and President of New York Metro SIM. Eric's going to lead a closing panel on shifting to SASE, identifying the next generation of skills that are needed. Eric, great to see you.
Great to see you as well, Hunter. Well, great session so far. I think, two parts with this session. Our goal is not to be repetitive with a lot of the great content which was previously given. But if SASE aside, the number one challenge with cybersecurity is just the shortage of skills. Depending on who you cover, there's anywhere from 3 to 5 million shortage worldwide in terms of people who are needed. Our goal for this session is to really focus on what are the skills required, because at the end of the day, that's the key constraint in terms of moving forward. So the first thing I like to do is just introduce our panelists. First, we'll have Nishant. I like each panel to just explain, a little about their background, maybe an example of how they're using SASE, and then we'll get into some questions about this topic. So Nishant, first up.
Hi, so my name is Nishant Bajaria. I'm the Director of Privacy Engineering at Uber. I report to the company's CISO. I got into this domain over the last 10 years, gradually migrating from front-end engineering to product management to data management to data protection, if you will. I also have a book out recently called Data Privacy, a run book for engineers. It's available on Amazon. And I use SASE in just about every aspect of my job. It's not just something I utilize. It's the way companies do business now. So if you are using a high-functioning, high-visibility platform that is global in nature, SASE is pretty much something you're directly or indirectly using. So that's a bit about myself. Happy to answer more questions, Eric.
Great. Next up, Bobby.
Yes, Bobby Singh. I'm the CTO and CISO for the Toronto Stock Exchange. SASE for me is, as Nishant mentioned, it's everywhere. We are a Netscope customer, so luck for them, I guess. But having said that, we've been on a journey with Netscope for the last many years. But also, I think as we're using the SASE into the zero trust journey as well. So I would say we're not there yet from a zero trust point of view, but that's SASE is playing a key component in our journey. So happy to be here.
Next, Fred Harris.
Thank you, Fred Harris, Societe Generale. I'm the head of cybersecurity risk, data risk, and IT risk. 35 years in IT and cybersecurity, and in banking, financial services, and professional services firms.
Okay. So we see, not just in terms of networking, it's a natural progression to have SASE, whether it's zero trust, SD-WAN, coupled with people work remote, it's a natural evolution. But if someone was to ask, and I'll put the question first to Nishant, if someone was going to ask you who hasn't explored this, look, we want to move toward a more SASE architecture, there's a strong need, we want, whether it's the firewalls or the VPN, what would be your first recommendation in terms of how to get them on this path and on this journey?
So I would say this is less a technical change and more a cultural change. And I love the point the previous speaker made about narratives, about story. If you think about SASE, it's not just a security or data protection incentive. Look at it through the lens of storage cost, look at it through the lens of security cost, look at it through the lens of data quality, the quality of the ML models. All of these rely upon cross-functional partnerships. They rely upon network and system stability. They rely upon sound data access. They rely upon some degree of predictability. And our entire tech siloed engineers, very little DevOps processes, everybody being able to customize things for their liking, right? Now we need to keep the best of that model while also making sure that people have this cross-functional muscle. So I would say, if you want to move to a SASE model, don't make it just a security or a compliance issue. Don't make it about risk or sticks. Make it about carrots. Make it about how it's a necessary precondition to business maturity and business growth and just moving to the next level. If you do that, you will improve the quality of data. You will improve the quality of your insights. You will make teams and organizational decisions more efficient. one of the reasons why engineers often leave companies is because they feel that things are getting too slow, too processy, too bureaucratic. The SASE model is about efficiency, it's about safety, it's about quality. So make it about the larger business narrative of efficiency and customer support, rather than about another thing the engineers have to do. And I feel like moving in that direction will move towards SASE anyways, and you will have all the benefits of SASE without the attendant costs and negative implications.
So can I add a couple of things? So I think I totally agree with Nishant. I think it's just not about technical journey. I think, it's really about being able to do a culture change, but more importantly, work with your risk management teams and others to really get a buy-in on the SASE journey as well. And one thing I would add, actually two things I would add. One is if you were not secure before, SASE is not going to get you there. So you got to do the fundamental work. You got to know where your crown jewels are, what you're trying to protect, have an ICMDB in place, and so forth and so on. And understand what you're trying to achieve. You got to have an end goal in mind. You can't just say, I'm going to do the SASE framework or implement some SASE solution and reach the end goal. And lastly, I would say from a cost point of view, I think if you look at, I think Nishant alluded earlier, being in a very traditional environment, it is becoming somewhat inefficient as well, which of course leads to cost and all these processes. So SASE, given the combination of security and network into one, I think it if done properly, it could help reduce some of the cost as well.
Look, I think some great points by both of you. I mean, I guess just the perspective I'm looking at, and I see a lot of different environments, and most organizations struggle with cybersecurity. Even if they have a team and they're not too short on resources, they struggle with security. And I think the one example which was given to me, that if you're working right now and you had a traditional on-prem environment and you went to the cloud, if you make a mistake, okay, so you tax your VMware environment, maybe something's exposed internally. But if you make a mistake in the cloud, having an elastic server or some poor access controls, it's exacerbated. So while I agree, technology is one aspect, the question is more for Fred. What are some things you think you can do to help enrich those skills to avoid potential issues? Or does this model lend itself for more simplicity?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think when we think about the way that SASE is today, right? If we take it back just a step, cybersecurity by design is a perimeter-based control discipline. And we're trying to enforce the perimeter controls external of our perimeter by doing illogical things like routing all the traffic to the cloud through the private company access, right? And through VPNs and things like that. SASE in its purest form would allow for that ubiquitous access from wherever you are. I really, when I think about SASE and the potential future, the software-defined security stack is going to be a necessary response to the software-defined networking stack that 5G is going to introduce, where the basic concept of perimeter will be transformed completely, right? So I think as we start to think about this evolution, it's very similar to when we started the virtualization and the server side of things, where we moved from physical-based controls to more logical-based controls, more software engineering than network was server engineering. And I think the evolution in skills is going to be similar here, right? Not saying that network engineering is a dying discipline, but the way that we do it, which is physical devices today, is going to become more of a software-defined configuration management problem of the future. So eventually, routing all the traffic through our own private networks to the public cloud providers will be a thing of the past.
Yeah, and to your point, you see with a lot of solutions, whether using to Meraki's for VPNs, I'm thinking, a particular, but you see it across the board a lot, even Office 365, which is really more tangential. You have security dashboards, compliance, just make it easier. I mean, coming back to you, Nishant, do you think this is an opportunity? Because the question is, VMware took a while for people to understand the concepts and optimize it. What would be some of the methods you would see to bring your teams up to and have these kind of required skills?
Yeah, so I would go back to something we heard a long time ago, the FUD and the fear factor. So I tell people that people think of security breaches as something that happens to the other people. Like it's almost like a disease, like somehow I have immunity and it's not going to happen to me. And then I tell people when Target was breached in 2014, they were PCI compliant. And the bad folks came through the heating system. Talk about the temperature rising, global warming, right? It's basically the least expected vector hit Target. And then when you go forward to the Colonial Pipeline breach that happened, I believe last year, the bad folks got in through an account that was available on the dark web, allegedly, and it was set up for VPN access without MFA. So the idea of having a set perimeter and having a finite number of attack vectors is gone. The perimeter is porous. So moving to SASE is about fundamentally changing how your company's security architecture is conceived. And how do you account for the target use case, the Office of Personnel Management use case, the Equifax use case, the Colonial Pipeline use case, the diversity of the attack vectors. And that's before you factor in nation states and DDoS attacks that are organized by the governments elsewhere in the world, right? So I would basically tell people, work backwards from what has gone wrong elsewhere. It's almost like, think of SASE as a Law and Order episode. I'm not sure how many Law and Order fans there are on this panel. The show is back on NBC. Thank goodness. Getting it off in 2010 was a mistake. But what I'm saying is, ripped from the headlines is the way to go. And if you think it can't happen to you, the 4 companies I just named, or the 4 organizations I just named, are about as different from each other as they can get. So I would work backwards from their failures and then ask yourself, what is it unique about your systems in terms of latency, in terms of distribution nature of the support, that makes your service what it is, and then use it as a starting point. What this means is, rather than getting into analysis paralysis and perfection search, you actually start making progress. So that's how I would do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Nishan. I think the challenge is human nature. And if you look, like, typically people, it's not going to happen. Then when something does happen, there is an incident, then there's a big investment and a lot of opportunity. So it's a tough thing to overcome.
Yeah. If I can just make one more quick point there, Eric. You know, my computer science professor in college, she was insanely smart. She had a sign outside her road that said that days of debugging saved me hours of planning and testing. It's kind of similar to that. You want to invest at the front end, and the shift left approach, I understand, it's become a bit of a cliche, but this time it's real. The call is coming from inside the house.
So, Bobby, in this environment, given the challenge, what do you think are some of the best methods to hire and retain talent? I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, where you said that you feel it's actually an opportunity because it's the latest and greatest.
Oh, God, thanks for that question. I think it's the easiest one nowadays, given supply and demand situation. But having said that, look, we've been over the last many years in the same dilemma in the cyberspace, and especially in some of the key areas on the IT side as well, where we're seeing a significant demand and supply is, of course, crunched. So I would say, I've taken a couple of approaches in the past just to make sure that let's start with the retention point of view. Over the last 2 years, as we all been pivoting towards home and stuff and whatnot, I have made it very clearly that we got to do internally more to retain, which is reaching out to the staff more often, doing one-on-ones for that matter, having a personal touch, if you want to call it. That's been really helpful. I think at the end of the day, I appreciate the fact that the financials that are thrown by other organizations do play a key role, but I also think the environment that we create, it needs to be long-term. You can't just say, I'm going to certainly pay someone 25% more to get them, and while not do anything with retention. So that was one of the things we did. We also created places where we actually did, had people put in their opinions, for example, opinion box, where we actually executed on some of the staff recommendations. And the other thing I would say is follow up on when the iron is hot. When someone does someone good, just follow up with some sort of pat in the back. Could be a small financial reward, could be just a note, but let people know and that we saw what they're doing and it's been appreciated. And last, empowerment. I think no employees will leave an organization if they're empowered to make a difference. I know it's easier said than done, but empower your employees to do more, take on more accountabilities, take on more risks, and I can assure you the potential will remain high. On the hiring aspect, we're not doing anything different than a lot of the other organizations are doing. We're certainly engaged with a lot of colleges and universities, but a couple of things I've done in the past few years is we've been partnering with some of the innovative companies. If you look at, your big 3 cloud providers or other high-tech fintech companies, our high-tech companies, we've been partnering with them to do some sort of incubation at the colleges and universities, or do roadshows with them, just to kind of get the university grads coming out to understand what we do, how we using technology, what it means to us in the organization, and the difference they can make when they work for us in the organization. And so that's been really our biggest kick in the can, and just doing a lot of partnership. And the last one I would say is just we've been actually approaching expanding our net even to different countries for that matter, trying to find relationships in different countries where we think we can do hiring. And COVID has proved that you can work remotely pretty well. So we're trying to look to see if there are countries or geographies out there that have the talent that we can tap into, and building that relationships with the organization that can help us tap into the talent. So that's the other thing I'm doing to retain to hire talent.
You mentioned some. What about previous staff? Have you done some retraining, or have people shifted job roles to improve their?
Oh, the cross-pollination thing is, I think, I didn't want to get into the SASE discussion, but SASE discussion is really interesting. Look, because of the SASE being a combination of network and cybersecurity, I have really done it. Actually, in the last 2 years or so, since we've been on this journey, we've now one team, basically a fusion center, where we have network and cyber teams are sitting together and not just looking at the same screen, but more importantly, having integrated processes as well. And we have folks from one side jump on the other side and vice versa from a cross-pollination point of view. Among other things, we cyber being such a hot skill, it worked to my advantage to some degree. We had some of the business folks as well coming into our shop. I thought that was really cool because we're really good at what we do from a technical point of view or cyber point of view. It's great to get people that are coming from the business side and then learning about cyber. Then they can actually tell us some of the business, what are the implications of cyber on the business, which I think is lacking at times. So that we've done a lot of cross-pollination that's been really helpful.
Yeah, we see a lot of instances where, to go back a couple of years, where organizations will make a foray into the cloud. They'll set up something AWS or Azure. They take a stab, and then they come back and they realize they have a complete mess. They don't understand what they have. They have a huge bill. There's security concerns, and then you do health checks, and a lot of times you implement like a CAT-FLZ or something. So, Fred, compared to past transformations, what do you see as some of the parallels here? Like,
yeah, so I think the cloud comparison is a good one, right? I think if you look at most firms' initial dipping of the toe in the public cloud, right, they did a great job in the look at the macro framework security, right? Let's make sure we got the trust and control framework right. Where they fail commonly is in the micro level design. So application by application, are they applying the framework methodologies and the cybersecurity controls at that micro level correctly? And because they may not be doing it correctly, because it's on the public cloud, it creates that dynamic of exacerbating the exposure by having it now on a public site. So it's building that care into the diligence around each application, each data use case, that you have the right security applied, the right model applied, right? So I think the same holds true for SASE going forward. It's, we can design all these wonderful networks and controls, but we have to pay attention to the, move it from the 10,000 foot view down to the ground level and make sure we're applying everything correctly, right? So I think that's going to be the biggest shift, but it's very similar to the problems we had at the early days of cloud adoption, right? So I think it's achievable and it's very, very similar.
And how did you build those skills when it came to cloud adoption? You use partnerships, expert,
Yeah, well, I was kind of fortunate at the time when cloud hit. I was at Deloitte, so I was building solutions both internally at Deloitte and for our customers, right? So I was surrounded by a lot of brilliant people that we worked with together, and then we're able to deploy it. And then I've taken that skill back to the banking sector over the last 7 years or so. And applied it there. But yeah, it's also working with your cloud providers, your consulting firms, having people like Rocco Grillo on speed dial and things like that, right? And leveraging that network.
Okay. Shifting back to Nishant, so how would you find, gentlemen earlier mentioned like the board and I've seen a lot where they give big increases to their staff to retain them. How do you balance the need to pay for these skills, retain them, have the proper cybersecurity advocates, and at the same time get guidance from have your business leadership supported? I've seen some cases where there will be a mass exodus because they wanted to pay their staff similar to other IT professionals, and they had to be educated that these are different skills.
No, totally. That's a great point, and this is a challenge I think all of us are facing, whether we like to admit it or not. Keeping people, making them feel that they have the impact and they have the actual scope of growth, right? Because promotions and upward mobility is about not just your impact, but about the necessity for your skill set to the business. So my proposal is, as you give people more money, more stock, and with all of which is a good thing, you also want to give them more skills. If you look at some of the SASE skills people need, these are the same skills that people on the engineering and the security side have, except typically these are thought of as two different skills, IT and security on this side, and people building capability on the other side. And it's time to sort of bring the two together. If you try to hire people with 10 years of experience in security and data protection, well, that skill set doesn't exist. With the exception of Carnegie Mellon, no one that I know of runs a program to provide you those sorts of skills, maybe Stanford down the street here. So if you educate people in-house with these skill sets, you are achieving multiple goals at the same time. You are building loyalty to the company because the employee sees that you're giving them the skills of tomorrow rather than just the skills they need to do the job today. That's point number one. Second is they will have a bigger impact because they will not just be building their tools in their silos. They will be able to have an impact across the company, and they will see themselves as fixing problems that are making life difficult for everybody else outside the company. So it's about making employees feel valid. The third thing you're doing is you're taking pressure off of your own recruiting partners because your HR sourcers are probably trying very hard to find that talent elsewhere. So rather than spending all this money on contractors who are overpaid to some degree anyways, why not give that money to your existing employees and give them additional skills? So I would say thinking of your security SASE business and your engineering engagement business as one global unit would be great, logistically speaking, and giving each the skills that are thought of to be the provenance of the other would be fantastic. And the board and the stakeholders and the customers will eventually see a company that is able to adjust to these changing needs, keep its people happy, and then your existing talent pool will keep your customers happy. So I feel like thinking a little differently is the way to go forward here.
Yeah, and if I can just build on that very quickly, one of the things that I do and I've done throughout my career, and now we're starting to do it across more of the units in my firm, is that I actually build certification and training into people's goals and I fund it, right? I'm building their skills, I'm building their resume, and it sounds counterintuitive, but the investing in them incentivizes loyalty for them to stay. And it's a tremendous benefit to the firm because you're upskilling people and you're preparing them. And then I guess the secret sauce is making sure that the skill upskilling exercise is meeting your roadmap, right? So it's the areas they want to move into, but it's also intersecting with your roadmap at the appropriate times, right? It's an effort worth investing in.
I think you raise, some really great things because, obviously in any organization, you want to make sure your manager, you like where you work and the overall culture, but so many people are attracted to technology because they want to learn. They want to constantly be on top. If you're in a stagnant area, that's going to be a factor, which is going to lead to people moving on. Bobby, coming back to, one of the unique challenges you have right now amid all the remote work and the great resignation is, certain companies, especially financial services sector, they want to bring people back in-house. How do you compete in that environment? I mean, what would be the suggestion? Do a hybrid type approach? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think that's a very good point. As the organization is coming back into the workforce or back into the offices, we're taking an approach where we're leaving it open. We're going to decide, let the manager work more importantly with the staff to decide what the work schedule looks like. I'm a big believer of the fact that, as long as the work that gets done, I personally don't care if it's between 9 to 5 or afterwards or before 9 o'clock. So I'm pretty open, and the organization has also taken a stance that we're going to be flexible in that effort as well. We'll see what that looks like, I think, from down the road in the next few months. However, I would say, though, I think, the new employees that we hired in the last 2 years that haven't even seen the offices or met anyone face-to-face, or the employees that we're going to hire in the future, I do think coming into the office, having some facial connections and meeting people personally and drinking a Kool-Aid is important, not just from a standpoint of working on projects, but also understand the culture and the environment of the organization. And that's why I think I was saying earlier, I feel like the once you have done that, then it makes it easier for you to work remotely. But initially, I think I would expect some of the folks to be in the office and get to meet people and understand the culture and how we operate to really be more productive at the end of the day.
Okay, so one final question for you. I'm going to bounce it off and get your thoughts. Rocco mentioned earlier, what's the future look like 5 years? I think we all agree there'll be broader adoption of SASE computing. The question is, what does the skills landscape look like? Do you think it's better, worse? I mean, the fact that you have maybe more single pane of glasses, supporting systems. And first, I'll go back to Nishant. What do you think we look like from a cyber skills perspective 5 years from now for broader, adoption of SASE?
I think from a 5-year perspective, I'm optimistic for a not very good reason. If you look at the energy around this topic, right, there's breaches taking place across the board. There's a lot of discussion about regulation enforcement. There's a lot of conversation about just national security and cybersecurity as being part of that. So I feel like all that attention is going to create a lot of people going into this discipline. Just as we had a ton of people with computer science degrees graduating in 2002, 2003, 2004, when I graduated, when the market was starting to slow down. In this instance, my hope is that even if we nail the supply issue, we understand exactly what those skill sets are. We make sure that people don't expect immediate results. And we also hope that people understand the problem a bit better. So my hope is over the next 5 years, we see an increased supply because of the attention on the issue. My concern is that people may end up graduating with either the wrong skills or with only a surface level of the skill set, or the expectations will be misaligned to how quickly some of these changes to the SASE world can happen, even with the heightened talent that might be coming into the space.
Bobby, summarize.
I don't know if I'm optimistic or what, but I think I've got a bit of a different mindset. I think I agree that, I hope in the next 5 years, the supply chain issue does get to resolve to a degree, and we don't have millions of open jobs as we see today. So that's one aspect. But having said that, I think I also, to Nishant's point, I think we need to go back to the drawing board at the high school level or even at the university or colleges to understand what the curriculum looks like. The 4-year degree or 5-year degrees based on which program you're in. It's a long term in today's IT world and cyber world. I think we've got to be able to have specific type of curriculum that actually people can graduate from and come out with those skills. And if you're trying to change a university curriculum, it's not a month's effort. It takes years and a lot of red tape to go through. And I do hope the fact that with the agility that we want in our workforce, that agility is also being forced upon, or to at least adopted by the universities and colleges to make changes as a skill set. So hope when we have people graduating in 5 years, the skill set match the needs of the day rather than being out by 2-3 years.
Fred?
Yeah, I'm optimistic for a couple of reasons. Number one is 5 years from now, you're going to start seeing technologies that exist today, like VPN and Wi-Fi, being depreciating because of the advent of 5G. So there's going to be a need to retrain those staff to do other tasks, and the logical step is cybersecurity. And then we're seeing a large number of enrollments in cybersecurity and computer science undergrad students at this point in most of the universities. And I think ultimately we're going to wind up with some sort of a US bill that's going to incentivize or pay for education in this space to build up our cyber defenses. So I think the combination of all those things will lead to a much better number of skilled professionals in the discipline.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on it. I think that there's certainly an attraction. A lot of people want to get into the field, but in a lot of cases, they maybe have the passion or just again. But I also think hopefully the platforms make it simpler, so a lot of the obscurity they don't have to deal with. So with that said, I want to thank you all for participating. Really appreciate the insight and the value, and thank everyone for listening. And I'll turn it back to Hunter.
Hey guys, Bobby, Nishant, Fred, thank you very much. Appreciate your active engagement, loyalty in these most incredible times that we're living in. Great panel, great job. Awesome summit, folks. Big shout out to Netscope, Insight, and Palo Alto Networks. Thank you so much for partnering with us and supporting today's digital summit. We look forward to seeing you again soon in person. Shout out to Larry Bilker and the Philadelphia SIM chapter. Great job, Larry. Really enjoyed working with you. Good job to the HMG strategy team, Zach, Connor, August, Ryan, Kimberly, Kelly, great job, as well as Melissa. Hey, coming up in April, live, we'll be in New York City, April 4th and 5th for the CIO Summit of America, live in person. You won't want to miss that. Live with Stephen M. R. Covey, talking and presenting his new book, Trust and Inspire. You want to attend, you'll get a free copy, a free autograph copy, as well as Dallas. We're in Dallas, April 6th and 7th, and finally in Silicon Valley, April 20th and 21st. So, hey, stay with HMG Strategy and stay engaged and stay positive and stay focused, stay upbeat, lead on, and stay with Hunter. Take care.
Please join HMG Strategy for future in-person summits. For more information, please visit hmgstrategy.com and keep up to date by following us on our social media platforms. Thank you. This has been a presentation of HMG Live.